I decided to make a Reddit post, and I decided to just go ahead and make this video alongside that for all my students who often by my instruction don't go on summer school, for example. Um, so yeah, I'm just basically just going to be an audio book. Morgan Freeman wasn't available, so I'm just going to do it myself. All right. So yada 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 Reddit introduction. But I guess if you don't know me, I've coached hundreds of players over 4 years with thousands of in-session hours. Despite my poorly chosen Reddit tag, top tier top lane, this experience encompasses all roles fairly evenly. I thought I'd share some of the problems I see over and over and potentially give you, the listener, some direction in this endless sea of information that is trying to get better at League. Obviously, this isn't definitive or necessarily relevant to you, as everyone is different, and this is a general post or video. With that being said, this information has a very high chance of being relevant to you. One of the biggest problems I have with, or one of the biggest problems people have with learning League, especially the type to go on our summer school, watch these types of videos, seek coaching, whatever, is missing the forest for the trees. Many teachers are happy to indulge them as there's a lot more trees to sell than forests. You can make more videos, you can do more coaching sessions, there's a lot more stuff if the people are confused and they don't know what they actually need to improve on. This is the first and probably the only post of this style I'll make because while there are thousands of little things that differentiates players of different skill, there are really only a handful of important things. Each skill in this handful I'll define as a fundamental, a term I try not to use as it is used nebulously and more often than not incorrectly, in my opinion. So yes, this is a post telling you fundamentals are important, but don't click away yet. They're not what you think. Almost every student that I coach agrees fundamentals are the most important thing. If I ask them, hey, are fundamentals the most important thing? They'll say yeah. A smaller but significant percentage actually reflects this in how they conduct themselves within the session. This smaller percentage tends to focus on things they perceive as fundamental to the game, likely due to prior consumption of content attempting to educate them on the game. Most agree that fundamentals are the most important thing. Most believe they understand what the fundamentals are. Why then do people pay me to coach them? If they already understand what they need to do to improve, surely they're wasting their money, right? Except one of the biggest reasons that anyone comes to get coaching from anyone is that they don't know what they're doing wrong. They know that they're not climbing, they know that they're hard stuck, they know that they're not clearly not improving at the game using their rank as a proxy as their skill, yet they don't see any major mistakes. Can you see the cognitive dissonance emerging here? If I ask someone to identify their mistakes in game, it usually looks like, I didn't need to die here, I misplayed, I should have lasted these creeps better. They only see microscopic mistakes when in the exact same games they're making countless macroscopic ones that are right in front of their eyes, they just don't notice it. To understand this, let's do a bit of an experiment. Open up a WordPad and write down what you consider to be the fundamentals of League. If you find this to be role specific, do whatever role is relevant to you. Pause the video. Okay. So you probably said something like CSing, wave control, jungle tracking, warding, vision control, or blocking. Let's just say. Maybe you said something less directly trainable, more vague skills like mechanics, team fighting, or damage foresight. All right, so just for the sake of this argument, how do we improve these? Well, the top set can be trained to 90% efficacy in solo queue in less than 100 games, assuming the player is reasonably comfortable piloting their champions and they're not change resistant. These are already two pretty big assumptions, but honestly, I've played with plenty of students who can get these basics down real quick within that time frame. Typically, those who have a lot less, they've been playing for less total time, so they're newer players and have prior experience working with teachers. So, like having a sports background, often people being older, as like our generation of 20 somethings and younger, um, very often don't like believe that anyone is smarter than them. So, um, so people that are more prone to listening and actually making major changes. It's not just um, how much they trust. It's also how used to like making big interventions they are, right? So they'll climb. Maybe they'll climb a league, but they're still not going pro anytime soon. Like, okay, if a gold 4 player becomes a plat 4, that's great, but we've taught them all these things. They've gotten better at all these things. They might not be as good as a challenger at all these things, but they're really good at all these things. So why are they only plat 4? So yes, this list contains important skills, but fundamentals are really just skill sets that don't change over time. That means you can forget about what items are best on your niche build or whatever you're playing then. But this doesn't mean that you can forget about setting up your base timers to get correct items. This doesn't mean that you can just build the same thing every game without considering game state. Here are a few examples of what I would prefer to define as fundamentals. Okay, let's look at power spikes. One of the most important things of understanding the game is knowing how all 10 champions operate at their respective item and level spikes, and best approximating how they will interact together. Hugely underfocused. Does this sound overly vague? Well, it's because it's not an easy skill. It's not. See, this is easy to sell. Any fucking I'm going off the script on Summoner School, but that's okay because I'm probably gonna roast a lot of them. This is not some fucking Diamond 4 player that like any goddamn like Diamond 4 player can just be like, oh yeah, it's or you don't obviously need to be Diamond 4 to say you need a CS, but like these things are all obvious, right? They're very basic. Anyone can just say them, but what do they actually mean? Hearing these things doesn't make you a better player. Hearing these things might not either, but they have a fucking way higher chance of actually being like, oh, this is stuff I haven't thought about before. This is stuff I haven't considered. These are situations, and there's so much more. So fundamentals aren't just this basic small list. It's just the stuff that doesn't change. So anyway, power spikes. Already said it. Camera control, another woefully underrated skill. Proofreading is important. That's what I'm doing here. Take a lesson from StarCraft 2. Okay, I fucking love StarCraft 2 because, well, I love using this lesson from it because they consider camera control a mechanic. Okay, that's something that people in League don't do, but we don't play on locked camera constantly. Like camera control is a mechanic. Nice Lee Sin montage. Let's see how you click on your lanes and see HP bars and minions, so you actually have some semblance of where to path. That's all those like Master Zero LP Nidalee players who like think they're hot chicks. They have good mechanics on Nidalee, but if you watch a VOD of their gameplay, it's like they don't even know how to look at lanes while clearing as Nidalee because it's too mechanically intensive for them. So presence, understanding what you're needed for. In solo queue, or pre-mades below semi-pro level for that matter, this is usually defined as be there when they arbitrarily decide to fight. That's it. However, you also need to understand, well, you need to understand what you're needed for, and then that allows, that gives you an idea of like when, right? So if you don't know what you're needed for, you don't know when you're needed. Make sense? Um, so these would be a few examples. This honestly, I need to go and proofread this, but anyway, tempo, how to create. Yeah, we'll just go read the goddamn post. Okay, if I told you not to consume educational content, I'm one of the people that I'm coaching. Go. This is your break. You can go on Summoner School just to read this. Okay, it'll be fixed. These are just more examples now. Tempo, how to create. How to create tempo, understanding in advance when you're going to be behind or ahead, understanding when to maintain versus trade tempo. Back timing, efficiently or effectively, sorry, 3 different skills in early, mid, and late game. Ties in with wave control and itemization the entire game, but becomes significantly more vision oriented as the game goes on. Mental resource management, thinking out the game when there is downtime, focusing on what's important. This ties in heavily with the missing the forest for the trees thing, and why I believe this type of overlearning is more often harmful than helpful. And I really believe that. I've gone from thinking it was useless to thinking it is actively harmful to overthink about all these minute details that are, what a lot of people end up finding when they're trying to get better at the game. Um, Flexibility, playing the game differently based on game state. Some games you need to group, and some you need to split. Some you need to be the bus driver, other times you need to be bus passenger. Some games you need to hard shove when the enemies leave lane, other times you need to follow. This might all sound obvious, but in games players often players will react instinctively to a situation, no matter the details. This becomes really obvious when I'm coaching like a Nivea main, and I see them play Ari, and it's just like, wait a second, you're playing this like you're a Nivea. Like he's really good at Nivea, and then okay, he's shoving every single lane, and whenever the enemy leaves lane, he kind of just shoves. And not that that's the correct move on a Nivea, but that as your generic default that always works, it's going to work 80% of the time on a Nivea, right? But on Ari, it's only going to work 20% of the time. So if you do it every time on a Nivea, it's not ideal, but it's good enough. It's passable. I can see why the instinct has gotten there, right? So he can get to a much higher elo with that playstyle playing a Nivea than he could with another champion. So he's basically, this is one of the biggest arguments against one-tricking, in my opinion. This is why I don't really recommend people to strictly one-trick champions. Okay, so all of these things and more work together and affect each other and create a skill set that we call League of Legends player. You already do most of these things to varying degrees of effectiveness. Some of them you might not. You might never consider power spikes in that way. You probably consider your own. You might not consider how others or how these affect it. Like it's one thing to consider your own. It's another thing to consider your the enemy laner. Like some are more obvious, level 2, level 6 power spikes. Those you might pay attention to, but understanding exactly how your team's items versus your other team's items stack up and which situations they'll be more advantageous on one side or the other. This is all again, it's almost infinitely deep, just like any of these skill sets.